Good afternoon everyone and welcome to today's webinar. By way of introduction, I'm Anne Livingston. I'm the chair of the Queensland Government Community Care Smart Assistive Technology Collaborative. I will be the moderator for today's webinar titled The Use of Electronic Assistive Technology by People with Disability in Shared Supported Accommodation. This webinar is part of a series being facilitated by Community Resourcing for the Community Care Assistive Technology Collaborative. These webinars have been designed from feedback and requests we have received through the collaborative, so thanks everyone for their contribution and the topics that you've been sending through. Our webinars are bringing together local, national and international perspectives in research and development, as well as focusing on the deployment of smart assistive technology, particularly in the community care sector. We've produced over 30 webinars in our series, and you'll note from recent webinars that we are now drilling down on specific issues as requested and identified by members of our collaboration. By way of introduction to community resourcing, we have extensive international linkages and have been fortunate to work with many projects and research. You'll see a few names of these national and international entities that we've been working with over a period of time. Community resourcing is also really proud to have been awarded in the first week of December a number of accolades for our recent project being the development of a consumer portal, and so we thank the voters who voted us the best initiative as voted by consumers at the recent ITAC conference. And late last year we were also very proud to have been awarded the National ICT Innovative Entrepreneurial Award for this project. It's also very exciting for us to have some of our projects that have resulted from the collaborative now emerging and being recognised, and one of those projects was recently a finalist in eHealth Queensland's Startup and Innovation Showcase, and this was for a project that had directly resulted from collaborations within our Community Care Smart Assistive Technology Collaborative. We're also particularly proud to mention that we've got a very robust and productive expert reference group. I'd like to acknowledge the individuals, but first of all acknowledge Professor Greg Teggett, who was recognised for his work with the collaborative and in other areas of smart assistive technology. And Greg, many of you would know, was a awardee of the Senior Australian of the Year for ACT in the Australian of the Year Awards this year. Several reference group members have also been recognised by the Minister of Innovation, Science and the Digital Economy and the Minister for Small Business as Advanced Queensland Digital Champions, and I acknowledge Dr. Mohan Karunanithy, Dr. Eleanor Horton, Stephen Koplik and myself, who've been appointed by the Minister to carry out digital inclusion projects throughout this state. Our expert reference group names are on the slide in front of you, and they assure that the information and activities relating to this project are of high quality and focused, and I would like to acknowledge their contribution to the collaborative as well as the project reference team. Recently we held a number of assistive technology events which engaged individuals, family members, formal and informal carers, as well as service providers throughout regional Australia. It's great to be able to get out to regional Australia and share the possibilities and benefits that technology can deliver. I welcome many of these participants from these roadshows to today's session, as well as welcoming back many who have attended past webinars. Indeed, we have some on board today who have attended all 30 webinars we've provided to date, so well done. Again, today we've got representation from every state and territory, Again, we've got some international guests coming on board, and I particularly acknowledge those that are bridging those time frames and time zones to participate. Those of you who have been involved in previous sessions know that community resourcing has been funded by the Queensland Government to bring together an online platform specifically for community care providers, but also now for consumers and their families who are interested in collaborating on issues and practices related to smart assistive technology. If you haven't already registered for the collaborative, I'd please encourage you to register at the website www.satcommunity.com.au as detailed on the slide currently. Our project has achieved extensive national as well as international geographical reach, and this is growing daily. We're pleased to announce that we've just got under 1,000 people interfacing with the collaborative on a regular basis, and this is growing daily. Many of today's participants would be aware that we're in the final stages of revamping the platform as well as putting together a consumer portal on the site. We've employed co-design and collaboration concepts in developing these new areas, and we'd welcome and look forward to your feedback on these new enhancements. Before commencing today's presentation, I need to note that neither Community Resourcing or the Department of Communities, Child Safety and Disability Services are promoting or endorsing any particular product, research entity or organisation. Rather, our webinars are brought together to inform viewers of examples of various smart assistive technologies in deployment or in development. As attendees at today's session, and in the interests of recording, you have your microphones muted, but don't let that stop you asking questions throughout the presentation or at the end of the presentation. You can do this by accessing the question pane on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll get to those questions, hopefully all at the end of the session, and any that we can't cover in today's session, we'll follow up with you individually after the webinar. Today we've got a really, I think, a groundbreaking presentation by Rebecca Jamwell. Rebecca will present on her research around the use of electronic assistive technology by people living with a disability, but also are living particularly in shared supported accommodation. By way of introduction, Rebecca is a registered occupational therapist and a PhD candidate at the Department of Occupational Therapy at Monash University. Rebecca has extensive clinical practice and experience, and this is particularly based in community rehabilitation for people with acquired brain injury. Rebecca currently works within the ABI Community Integration and Support Service at the Royal Talbot Rehabilitation Centre in Melbourne. In this role, she provides interim occupational therapy services to people transitioning from inpatient rehabilitation to community living following an ABI. As a research officer with the Summer Foundation over the last 4 years, Rebecca was in a unique position in working to deliver evaluation projects exploring the initial launch of the National Disability Insurance Scheme in Victorian trial sites, as well as evaluating built technology and support environments for people with disabilities. Rebecca's doctoral research focuses on the use of electronic assistive technology by people with a disability, and as I mentioned before, specifically living in the community in supported accommodation. Please join with me in welcoming Rebecca to today's webinar. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you for that lovely introduction. I'll just wait to share my screen with you all. Okay. And I'd just like to thank the SMART Community Care Smart AT Collaborative for this opportunity. So as Anne mentioned, we'll be discussing research today that's looked at electronic assistive technology use in shared supported accommodation by people with disability. But before we jump into it, I'd like to acknowledge my PhD supervisors, Libby Callaway, Louise Farnworth and Di Winkler, who have worked with me on this research. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge I'll just get rid of that little thing here for you. Acknowledge the funding that I've received for this research via Victoria's Transport Accident Commission through the Institute for Safety, Compensation and Recovery Research. So just as a background to this research, we know that people with disability can require long-term support to maintain community living, and that there are a number of housing and support options available. One of the more prevalent models we've seen emerge in the last 30 to 40 years is shared supported accommodation, or SSA, which includes residential group homes and cluster style units. Now, being members of the Smart AT Collaborative, we're all aware of the burgeoning area of electronic assistive technologies. These technologies are presenting exciting opportunities for many, including those living in shared supported accommodation. So we're starting to see the significant potential that EAT offers as a flexible and efficient way of delivering shared support to a group of residents. And we also know that EAT can act as a tool in enabling people to perform activities of daily living they may otherwise have difficulty with, and offer people enhanced environmental control and autonomy in choosing when and how they complete an activity or when and how support is delivered. With the trial of the National Disability Insurance Scheme alongside existing state-based insurance schemes like the Transport Accident Commission, there is growing recognition that electronic assistive technologies can be used to assist in the delivery of support to people with disability. So just to give you a sense of what I mean when I say electronic assistive technology, this research has really investigated two distinct types. So specialised technologies such as environmental control units, communication devices such as light riders, specialised software, epilepsy monitoring systems, medication reminders, vital call or other safety monitoring systems, and other attendant call systems. And we've also looked at electronic assistive technologies available to the general population. So mobile and smartphones, tablets, laptop and desktop computers, and other technologies used by the mainstream market, including home automation technologies, which are being seen more frequently in private residences. So, knowing that electronic assistive technologies are advancing all the time and present such exciting opportunities for people with disability, our group wanted to explore how people with disability are currently using technology. But given the size of that task, we decided to focus on the technology use of people living in SSA settings in Victoria, because as I mentioned earlier, SSA is one of the more common housing options available to people with disability. So through 3 different studies, we aim to gather data on the incidence of electronic assistive technology use in Victorian SSA settings, documenting what people were using and why, and exploring users' experience and satisfaction with the technology that they used. We wanted to describe barriers and enablers to electronic assistive technology uptake and ongoing use. And we wanted to explore the relative risk of reduced electronic social networking integration for people with disabilities when compared to the general Australian population. So what we mean by ESN is writing to people for social contact using the internet, including emailing, using social media sites such as Facebook, talking to people for social contact via online video links such as Skype, and making social contact with people by talking or text messaging using a phone. So study 1 was a quantitative study which involved telephone surveys of house managers. In total we surveyed 32 house managers who represented 52 houses, and in doing so we gathered raw data on the technology use of the house and then some more detailed data on the residents who were using technology. So of the 254 people who lived in those SSA settings, we found that only 46% were using any form of electronic assistive technology at all. And only 54% of the SSAs included in the survey offered internet access to their residents, which was really striking for us when we compared this data with ABS data, which shows that 86% of Australian households have access to the internet. So it's quite a difference between the two groups. We found that a quarter of the resident group had purchased devices themselves, and about 20% used shared devices available at the house, such as a shared computer or tablet, and family members were the next largest source of device provision for this group. So in regards to the types of technologies in use, tablets came out on top, being used by 38% of the group, followed by smartphones at 29%, desktop computers at 28%, and laptops and mobile phones with an equal share of 22%. So something in common about those top 5 devices is that they all support multiple functions. Here we have the key reasons for technology use. These are just 6 out of the 13 reasons identified, but social contact came out on top with over 70% of the group using their electronic assistive technology for this reason, followed by recreation at 49%. Then there's a bit of a gap between those top 2 reasons and the following 4, so safety, environmental control, everyday occupation and memory compensation, all with less than 20%. So when we collected this data, we took note of occasions where a multifunction device, such as those top 5 devices on the previous slide, were used for a single purpose. And with all 173 multifunction devices considered, nearly 43% were used for a single purpose. And furthermore, about 7.5% of the devices owned by this cohort weren't included in these counts as they'd been abandoned by their users. So commonly larger items such as laptop computers or single function items like communication devices were abandoned for tablet technology. So from that survey, we invited SSA residents with an acquired brain injury who were identified as technology users by their house manager to participate in a single semi-structured interview, and 22 people agreed to participate. And alongside some general questions about what they were using and why, we used 2 published measures to structure the discussion, which were the Psychosocial Impact of Assistive Devices Scale, or the PIADS, and the Quebec User Evaluation of Satisfaction with Assistive Technology, the QUEST. So we recorded the interviews and analysed the transcripts to understand the themes of the participants' collective experience, and we found that electronic assistive technologies impacted these 4 areas in particular. So life role participation, particularly that of maintaining key family roles such as parenting. They impacted the participants' sense of safety when accessing the community. They increased participants' sense of autonomy in activities of daily living, and they enabled communication with others. So key enablers to technology use identified by the participants included experience using these technologies prior to their injury, design of the device and its user interface that enhanced ease of use, and devices that supported multiple functions. On the flip side, key barriers identified included insufficient planning, consultation and support that was often experienced when a device was first obtained. So we had examples of people abandoning light riders because they preferred to try to use their voice or try other methods of communicating, which really probably should have been identified by the therapy team in the prescription phase. So participants also identified that there was limited ongoing support available. So there was limited opportunities for this group to upskill in their tech use. And while design was identified as an enabler, it was also identified as a barrier for some participants. For example, the small letters on smartphone keyboards and the slide to unlock feature were difficult for some participants to use. Unreliable or restricted internet access also impacted people's use. In regard to user satisfaction, which we measured using the QUEST, participants were consistently less satisfied with the services they received in relation to the technology they used, which includes information, maintenance, repairs and so on, than they were with the devices themselves. But despite some of those barriers identified and the lower satisfaction rating for services received, the results of the psychosocial impact measure, the PADS, demonstrated that technology use positively impacted its users. So positive impact is rated from 1 to 3 on the PADS. So these scores for competence, adaptability and self-esteem were quite close to 2, demonstrating a fairly strong positive impact of device use. Given the potential of technology I spoke about earlier, we thought we might find people using their electronic assisted technology as part of their therapies and support delivery, but they rarely were in this group. Home automation technology installed at one participant's SSA had actually been turned off as it had had a number of teething issues, so we didn't see the potential realised for this group of participants. The final study I'll briefly mention today involved the electronic social networking subscale from the Community Integration Questionnaire revised version. We used that particular subscale in the survey of house managers from study 1 and collected 91 complete subscales. We then matched those 91 cases with 4 cases from data collected by Libby Calloway and her colleagues on just under 2,000 people from the general Australian population. So the cases were matched on age, gender, income, living location and whether they live with other people, which of course all 91 cases did as they lived in shared supported accommodation. I'd just like to acknowledge our colleague Joanne Entercott from Monash University who worked with us to match and analyse the data to determine the probability or relative risk of reduced ESN integration for people with disability using Poisson regression. And what we found was that our participants were 2.1 times or 210% more likely to report reduced ESN integration compared to the general population. So this means that this group were communicating less using Facebook, Skype, email, talking and texting on the phone than the general population. So the results of that third study show that there is a link between disability and low integration for electronic social networking that cannot be attributed to the person's age, gender, income, where they live, or the fact that they live with other people. So this link was even more striking considering that the group we surveyed were EAT users and around 70% said they were doing so for social contact. By calculating the relative risk of low outcomes, we now have a more precise appreciation of the impact that living with a disability has on ESN integration and the digital divide that exists between people with disability and others. So the findings of this study reinforce the need for a targeted, sustained focus on interventions that influence ESN participation, which has also been identified by other authors. And from study 1, we know that some people already possess the resources they need to enable electronic social networking. People are purchasing devices themselves or accessing them through family members or sharing with others. So in this way, clinicians have an opportunity to support social integration by targeting electronic social networking uptake, skill building and use in their interventions without the person necessarily needing to purchase a new device to do so. It's also important to remember that the NDIS will provide further opportunities for access to electronic assisted technologies that can enable electronic social networking, but we need to keep researching in this area given the potential impact of electronic assisted technology that we've identified already. So in tying it all together, this research has given us an insight into the way electronic assisted technology is being used by people living in Victorian SSA settings. We've seen that technology use positively impacts residents' sense of autonomy in everyday activity and participation in valued life roles. However, while key bodies like the TAC and NDIA recognise the potential for these assistive technologies to influence support delivery, this research demonstrates that EAT is currently an untapped resource for the participants we met and that a digital divide certainly exists between the group this group and the wider Australian population. So just to reiterate, we had just over half of the population have access to the internet at home compared with 86% of the general Australian population, and this group were 210% more likely to experience reduced ESN integration. So in addition, a number of devices that were in use by this group were being underutilised, particularly those multifunction devices that were being used for a single purpose. Some reasons why this might be the case include a lack of awareness around what the device can be used for, a lack of support in device selection and setup in the first instance, and a lack of ongoing support over time to change the way people are using their technology or to upskill. So considering that this research has identified a digital divide for people with disability that we're all aware of, there are a range of questions remaining which require further research to answer, some of which include: how can we build integration of technology into the daily lives of people with disability with a focus on independence, autonomy, social connection and skill development? How can we ensure that technology prescribed is used for its intended purpose and to its greatest potential? And how can we ensure that training and ongoing support and evaluation structures are in place? So to start to answer those questions, particularly that first question, our group have worked to develop 4 digital stories that showcase electronic assisted technology used by people with disability, really as a tool to build the capacity of people with disability and the wider community to consider how they might be able to apply technology solutions. So I thought I'd share one with you today. The story you'll see is about the electronic assistive technology use of a young woman named Mel, who has recently moved out of home to live on her own. Mel has low vision, so this story showcases the technology solutions as she uses to support her independence. And you'll see some of the Apple iOS features that Jackie Kirkman spoke about in her recent webinar. So I'll play that video for you now.
I'm renting a unit and I've made it my own. I love where I live, but I value my independence even more. My guide dog Darcy and I make a great team, but technology also plays a significant role in my daily life. There is a history of blindness in my family. My vision is virtually non-existent now, but I can see light and dark. My mother had me do orientation and mobility camps for children before my vision disappeared completely. We learned things like travelling skills, public transport skills, and long cane skills. I also studied Braille and print while I could still see. I keep up my long cane and other such orientation skills because my dog can get sick or batteries on my equipment can go flat, and I don't want to get stuck at home. I recently went to Tokyo on a blind tennis trip, and I couldn't take Darcy, so having my cane skills meant that I could still be independent. My iPhone is amazing. I use Apple's screen reader called VoiceOver, so when I move my fingers up and down the screen, it tells me what I've got them on.
Creativity folder, 6 apps. Education folder, 4 apps. Entertainment folder, 5 apps.
I'm the resident photographer in our family, so to keep up my skills, I use the iPhone to tell me what's in the photos. When I scroll through photos, VoiceOver can tell me how many people there are and describe obvious features.
Photo, tennis, racket, landscape, slightly blurry, image.
It makes it a lot easier to make sure I'm putting the right photos on my Facebook page or to send important photos to my friends. It even recognises emojis.
Smiling pile of poo. Face with tears of joy.
I can access an ATM in 2 different ways. The first is by plugging in a pair of headphones so that it reads out my selections to me.
Welcome to NAP's Audio Enhanced ATM. Insert your card with the embossed side facing upwards.
Or I can set up a one-button favourite transaction that I don't require headphones for. The ID Mate scans things that have a barcode and it tells me what they are. This is important, especially if there are 2 products that feel exactly the same.
Campbell's Country Metal Potato and Beef 500 5G.
I love to read, but Braille books can be really cumbersome. The Bible has 18 volumes. When I read books, I use a device called my Victor Reader Stream. It can download audiobooks, and I can listen to audio-described films on it.
In the infirmary, Ginny and Hermione sit beside Ron's bed as Madame Pomfrey checks his temperature. Harry turns as a group of staff come in.
I'm thinking on your part, Harry. You seem so. Just very proud of your student nurse.
And I could even read that day's newspaper on it.
PH. Headline. Our ghost's gone.
Back in the early 2000s, Nokia and a software company released a camera phone that I can use to read my letters and bills. I take a photo of the text, and within a few moments, the phone converts the written characters into speech.
Take a picture. Guide Dogs Victoria would like to invite all our very special Buckingham members to attend our Meet the Mums event.
It can't do handwriting, but it will warn me if my photos are off-center.
Down with 3 degrees counterclockwise relative to a page. Text cut off on right and left.
I love getting out and exploring. I use the Maps app on my iPhone if I need to get somewhere in a hurry, but if I'm exploring a new place, I use a device called the Trekker Breeze, which is a GPS system.
Extended search, Commonwealth Bank, Look Line, Manhattan Shoes.
The voice software tells me important details about where I am, can describe my surroundings and important landmarks.
Commuter rail station.
I went to Adelaide recently, and I put the Trekker into explore mode. When I was ready to go back to my motel, I told it to navigate me to the location that I'd landmarked before I left. Along with my cane, I carry a mini guide, which uses infrared beam to locate obstacles. Even though I have all this technology, I still like to use a portable Braille machine. Braille is my way of expressing myself. But me being me, my Braille device has a few added features. I can connect to YouTube, Google, social media. I can even use word processing and email and many other programs on it.
Search results. SBS TV 910 discovery.
You have confronted the challenges facing Krista.
It uses Braille input, and the output Braille display is refreshable.
My biggest love though is riding horses. At the moment I'm training so that one day I can train horses.
To keep me orientated, I put a common metronome in each corner of the arena so that I know when to turn. Honestly, there are a million ways to get over the challenges.
Sure, I like to find ways of doing things differently, but my pet hate in life is relying on others to do stuff.
What good would it be if I couldn't communicate with my family via email or talk to my Facebook friends? I reckon I'd wind up pretty damn miserable. Without all this technology, I'm not sure that I could live on my own quite as easily. I couldn't go down the street and explore and catch trains. Couldn't read books, mail or bills. I couldn't read emails or communicate with my friends. Nowhere near as easily as I can now. If you can find me another blind person who does all this stuff that I do without technology, I'll eat my hat.
I'm ready for each challenge that you throw at me. I guess technology just gives me life.
So Mel is a great example of someone who's using a range of mainstream and specialised technologies in everyday life. And I think something really interesting people have said to us in giving feedback about Mel's video is that they've had no idea that there were that many devices available to support people with low vision. And that's exactly what these videos are trying to target. They're trying to raise awareness around the possibilities the electronic assisted technologies present. So I welcome you to view the other digital stories by John, and a service provider. And we also have a version of Mel's video with audio description to make the video more accessible to people with low vision. So thank you very much for your time today. I welcome any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Great presentation and fabulous to finish with that video. Puts it all into context. been a great presentation today, Rebecca. We've got a number of questions coming through.
Fantastic.
And I'm going to start with, I guess, a comment and then a question. Maureen's picked up on your comment about the lack of digital inclusion of people in your research.
Yes.
And she noted that you talked about only around or less than 50% are engaged and included on the digital highway as opposed to 86% of the general population.
Yes.
And Maureen was wondering if you'd had a look at the fairly newly released Australian Digital Inclusion Index and whether you've
I certainly have.
actually drawn some conclusions or some comparisons to your project. Shall I hand it over to you?
I certainly have. Yeah, sure. So I certainly have seen that document, and it's a fantastic document, and it certainly aligns very, very closely with the findings of this research that people with disability are less digitally included, rather they are at times digitally excluded in Victoria, and I believe nationally as well. I've certainly taken an interest in the Victorian index and found that the findings from that to be quite closely aligned with this research.
I guess the other point to Maureen's question too is around there's obviously particular segments of the population that are disadvantaged, people with disabilities, low income, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander and older people, but there's certainly a defining of geographical disadvantage. Have you explored that at all? I guess most of your research has been in metro areas, is that correct?
Yeah, our research has been based in Victoria, which certainly doesn't have the regional spread that a lot of other states do, such as Queensland. But certainly we did have a fairly even spread of Metro Victoria and rural Victoria represented in the study, almost 50-50 I believe. But when we did do the relative risk analysis of reduced electronic social networking, we controlled for those factors. So we controlled for living location, which was metro versus rural. We controlled for income, and to Maureen's point, certainly people with disability in this group, about 80% were receiving the disability support pension, so very low income. But the analysis controlled for location, income, age, gender, and whether they live with someone else or not. So even when compared to someone else in the Australian population, an Australian of working age who has the same demographic factors as the person with disability, the people with disability were still 2.1 times more likely to experience digital exclusion or reduced electronic social networking rather. So, you know, certainly those other factors would contribute, but that analysis does show that disability itself has its own, there's a link there between disability and reduced electronic social networking.
Fantastic. I've got a question from David, who's a community care provider. Thanks to Rebecca, great presentation today. Really enjoyed the sections and the information you shared about what devices have the most traction. We're a community care provider and we're looking to assist our client group become more digitally included by supplying some devices or suggesting to families good Christmas presents to buy our clients.
Yeah.
And so David asked if you had any particular pointers for him in respect to the selection of the device that would get the best outcomes for individuals and return on investment.
Sure. Well, I think it can be quite an individual process, so I think it is important to sit down with the person or the people they're thinking about using the technology with and finding out exactly what they want to get out of a particular device. But having said that, this research has really found that those multifunction devices, so your tablets, your smartphones, things that can be used for various purposes are really more practical and more user-friendly, and I think you know, they have a lot more popularity, I guess, both in the mainstream market and the assistive technology market. So I think, you know, you don't necessarily have to look at a specialised option. I think the, you know, mainstream options that are very socially acceptable and provide a range of options quite often are the preferred options, which is what we found in this group. But really I think it's important to have that conversation and that planning with the person and their family, because we found in this study that people often didn't get that and that they weren't able to maximise the use of their device.
Thanks, Rebecca. Another question from Fiona is around, you made some comments in your presentation around the lack of alignment in some situations of the assessment to what was actually working for the client.
Yes.
In the context of a changing environment around assessment, Fiona asked if you'd make some comments on that in terms of perhaps developing new guidelines for assessment around smart assistive technology.
Yeah, sure. I think, again, taking it back to basics, and you know, most allied health professionals practice from a client-centered perspective. So I think just rather than looking for a device or a solution that we know has worked with other people and that we've had success with in the past, you know, taking a step back and thinking, I'm working with this individual, I'm going to find out what they need, what they'd like to address, and work with them to find a solution that meets their needs rather than trying to, you know, use a solution to meet their needs first. So keeping the person at the centre rather than the device at the centre of your prescription process. And I think something that's come out of conversations I've had with other health professionals is that we can't be the experts in this necessarily, and there's groups around such as LifeTech in Queensland, we have Comtech in Victoria, and the other independent living centres often have assistive technology experts that we can go to and talk to. And you know, I think resources like this one, the Smart AT Collaborative, where we can all share our experiences and different devices that we've found to work, or different applications or software. I think we need to remember that we're not necessarily technology experts, but the information is out there and we can reach it if we look for it. So, you know, taking on that more investigative role alongside the client, in collaboration with the client, I think is really important. And yes, we are living in a changing world where the National Disability Insurance Scheme will be changing the way we assess for devices. So I think just coming back to those basics that we've all learnt about and worked towards in our practice is really important.
Thanks, Rebecca. Another question from Colin. It's a comment about the ability of new smart assistive technology to really be personalised and tailored to individual needs. And I guess that in itself presents a challenge for service providers, allied health, in prescribing, assessing and deploying those technologies, and then being in the know to personalise and tailor those. You made mention to some previous webinars that Jackie Kirkman has been offering around really basically tailoring one type of technology. Do you see that's more and more going to be something that providers need to get their heads around?
I think so. As I just mentioned, you know, there's experts out there like Jackie Kirkman who we can go to for that information and advice around tailoring a solution to an individual. I think although mainstream devices are becoming more ubiquitous. Certainly the accessibility features are really exciting, particularly on the iOS platform, that do allow that customization and tailoring. So I think, yeah, it's something to really keep in mind and look for the information that's out there and seek it from the experts.
Thank you. And one final question is probably all we've got time for today, Rebecca, and it's from
Sure.
Elizabeth. Where can I access the psychosocial impact of assistive devices scale and the Quest measures?
Yeah, sure. So you can access the Quest online for free from the Measurement Instrument Database for the Social Sciences. That's MIDSS. If you pop that into Google, you'll find the Quest. The PADS is a little bit trickier. You can email the author. I can type through that email address now if you like to post on the chat.
We could put that on also on the collaborative site. Imogen will post that this afternoon for people who are interested as a lead up to follow on from your webinar today.
Yeah, so I think the PADS, it's best to email the author, and yes, Anne will arrange for those details to be made public. But I think it's, you know, really important to be using those sorts of evaluative tools. They're both really easy to use, and they just allow you to take a step back with the client and say, is this solution actually working for you? Are you happy with it? Are you happy with the device and its dimensions and its weight and the way it works and its user friendliness and the services you receive, the maintenance, the follow-up, the repairs, and the PADS more so around how it's impacting people emotionally. Is it increasing your embarrassment or your frustration, or is it increasing your sense of confidence and self-esteem? So I think they're really useful measures, and I'd encourage people to be using them in their practice with people in evaluating the effectiveness of a particular solution.
Just one final comment. I've got a number of people on the line who are really keen to continue to collaborate on some aspects of your research, Rebecca, and they're hoping that you're willing to collaborate as well. So we're very we'd like you to continue this discussion, I guess, on the Community Care Smart Assistive Technology Collaborative, and encourage those people to post their questions or to look at the material that Rebecca may post following this presentation in response to some of those questions.
Yeah, I'd be very happy to.
Terrific. Thank you, Rebecca. Great research agenda that you've got there. When do you actually finish your PhD?
Hopefully late next year.
We look forward to continuing to hear the progress and looking forward to the success of that, your endeavours. So thank you again, Rebecca. Great presentation today. Really fulfilled a number of needs that the participants of the collaborative were having around this issue. So again, thank you for your presentation today.
No, thank you all for joining and listening.
Thank you. Just a few things to finish off. Again, remember, if you haven't registered for the collaborative, we know that people can access our webinars without necessarily registering, but we'd love you to register. That way you'll get regular updates, regular input from the forums that are occurring in the collaborative, and information about upcoming events. We have a number of events in terms of webinars planned for 2017, and these will be sent shortly via your registration at the site. A couple of other activities that we're doing around February next year. We're running a series of rural and remote smart assistive technology roadshows. So if you are in any rural and remote locations, we'd love to hear from you, and we look forward to visiting during February. In March, the end of March, I'd encourage people to have a look at the World Science Festival being held in Brisbane. A number of smart assistive technology for independent living presentations are being offered and bringing together some of the world's greatest scientists to our hometown. We also have a series of roadshows operating in April through Far North Queensland, and in the 9th of May, and just note a slight change to the date if you've been involved in other webinars. We're holding a community care business transformation through innovation conference, and that's aligned to the Australian Living Labs Innovation Network conference the following day. Both will be held at QUT in Brisbane. And we're also bringing a series of international speakers for those two events to Australia, and we're going to be also aligning a series of events in New South Wales with those international guest speakers. If you're interested, we're also holding a study tour in Asia and Canada at the latter part of June 2017, and further information will be available shortly. That tour is going to concentrate on co-design, co-creation and new service models in respect to smart assistive technology. Further information will be out early in the new year. By way of finalising today's webinar, I'd particularly like to thank the Community Care Smart Assistive Technology project team led by Elizabeth Dodd and ably supported on today's event by Imogen Guinea. So thank you team members for producing and providing the infrastructure for today's webinar. I'd like to highlight and acknowledge again the Community Care Smart Assistive Technology Expert Reference Group, the members you saw earlier in the slide. Thanks for your voluntary contribution to the development and direction of the collaborative. It's always good to thank funders of projects like this, so we do thank the Queensland Government through the Department of Communities, Disability Services and Child Safety for their support in providing seeding grant to establish the collaborative, and their ongoing support of the collaborative through input, feedback and future funding. I particularly though like to thank today's presenter. Thank you, Rebecca Jamwell, for providing an insight into your great research and also to providing some really practical information for service providers and individuals who are accessing services about the role that smart technology can play in promoting more engaged and independent living. So thank you, Rebecca. Great presentation today, and we thank you for your time. If you'd like some further information, please email us at sat@communityresourcing.com.au, and we look forward to welcoming you to our next series of webinars.